Roche-de-Fermois soldiers, sensing their commander's desire to be away as fast as possible, panicked on the docks in the dark and flung themselves into any boat available. Their general then succeeded in accidentally setting his headquarters afire and lighting up the chaos for the enemy to see. All at the same time, one of his artillery detachments, securing the floating bridge between Ticonderoga and Mount Independence, was discovered dead drunk at its post. As Mount Independence fell, the Americans fleeing south on Champlain aboard the surviving galleys of Arnold's fleet prayed that the huge iron chain stretching across the lake from Ticonderoga to Mount Independence would hold back pursuers. In the event, the British Navy made quick work of the chain, and as the retreating Americans neared Skenesborough, they were under fire from enemy gunboats. Within a few hours, Arnold's surviving vessels were sunk or scuttled, the mills and warehouses at Skenesborough were burning, and survivors were floundering through a dismal wilderness labyrinth in hopes of reaching Fort Edward. Billows of smoke from captured Skenesborough could be seen for miles, and at this signal, native warriors screening Burgoyne's lightning advance converged on the forest trails leading south. Not all of Roche-de-Fermois' frightened soldiers would reach Fort Edward. In years to come, road builders occasionally unearthed bones at the side of old trails where some had fallen in ambush. General St. Clair's column, meanwhile, negotiated the treacherous forest road running along the eastern side of South Bay towards Hubbardton, Vermont. So narrow was this trail that his regiments often passed obstructions Indian file, leaving companies stretched out far behind. The weather was sultry, humid, with annoying cloudbursts, and many soldiers, short of sleep, hungry, and sick, fell out of line exhausted, driven nearly mad by mosquitoes and flies. St. Clair had placed his most reliable regiments at the end of the long column, closest to the onrushing enemy. In the middle of the column marched Seth Warner and his Green Mountain Boys, while at the rear Colonels Hale and Francis, the best St. Clair had, rushed their tired men along just ahead of the enemy. These were New Hampshire and Massachusetts Continentals, who did not fully appreciate how fast expert British light infantry could advance over difficult terrain. All the way south from Mount Independence, Brigadier General Simon Fraser was hot on their heels, closing to within 3 miles of the struggling rebels as night fell on July 6th. Major Robert Grant, Fraser's spear point, was convinced that they would have the rebels in the morning. But what British regulars did not fully appreciate was how quickly the rebels could deploy and maneuver in deep woods. If the rear of St. Clair's column had kept moving on July 6th, closing up on the main body as ordered, the sharp and vicious fight at Hubbardton might never have happened, and Schuyler could have yet skirted disaster with his infantry intact. Instead, Seth Warner and the Green Mountain Boys disobeyed orders. Falling out of line to bivouac early in the evening, they effectively sent the New Hampshire regiments behind them into bivouac as well. Warner by this time was a savvy guerrilla leader with extensive experience in woodland retreats. In his defense, it might be said that his men were done in by an arduous march, many burdened with sick friends recovering from an epidemic of measles and unable to go farther without food and rest. But the consequences of Warner's insubordination were realized the next morning when, at daybreak, while the New Hampshire men cooked breakfast beside Sucker Brook, Grant's infantry attacked with bayonets, scattering some, capturing others. The Americans fell back to a flat hilltop with few trees, formed line, and began to deliver a deadly return fire. Major Grant climbed a stump to see what was happening and fell dead at the feet of his men. One volley dropped 20 of his soldiers before they could even see their opponents or recognize that they had stumbled into a blocking force several hundred in strength. Over the next 2 hours the Americans had the better of the fight, as repeated attempts to turn their flanks were beaten back with heavy loss to the enemy.